Welcome to the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report for Friday, November the 13th. We're ready for another weekend in NFL and college football. A little bit later recording the video today. Some stuff came up, but we're here and we're still ready to deliver the Friday show. And the Friday show means Friday football six-pack time. We're going to break down 3 college games on Saturday, 3 NFL games on Sunday for the upcoming weekend in football action. We'll look at Notre Dame, Boston College, Oregon, Washington State, Wisconsin, Michigan in college football action. So we got an ACC game, Pac-12 game, and a Big Ten game, a little bit of everything. And then we'll turn it over to the NFL and break down 3 NFL games, Bucks, Panthers, Bills, Cardinals, and an NFC West battle with the LA Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. So very good 6-pack of games to break down. Let's get right to it. Let's start with college football for Saturday. Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Boston College Eagles. We've got Notre Dame, double-digit favorites in Chestnut Hill, the total 51 in this game. Dangerous game potentially here for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who admittedly they've had a great season to this point, no question. The big crowning achievement so far of the season was last week against Clemson. If you're just a pure college football fan, you loved that game last week. It was a tremendous game, outstanding football game. Back and forth it went. No team gave an inch, and it went to overtime. Thrilling, down to the wire, dramatic finish, and Notre Dame finds a way to pull out the victory and knock off Clemson, a Notre Dame team and a program that, as I've mentioned last week about this game, about that Notre Dame Clemson game, previewing it. I said they had their difficulties beating the absolute best teams in college football, the elite teams in the country. And finally, Notre Dame registers a significant win against a team of that magnitude. But now they've got to turn around, go on the road after a huge win like that, and end up playing a feisty, tenacious, and admittedly a much better Boston College team than I think a lot of people expected coming into this season. You got to give Boston College a whole hell of a lot of credit for the way they have played this season. They've been competitive in a majority of their football games this year. Jeff Hafley, the head coach, I think he deserves a lot of credit for what he's been able to do here with Boston College in a very short period of time. Coming in from Ohio State, a guy that had to turn around a program that really Steve Adazio didn't necessarily leave the cupboard fully stocked for Jeff Hafley, but the defense has played markedly better than Boston College's defense did last year, at least a little bit better at least than they did last year, which is a positive for them going into this season. They have played better on the defensive side of the football, and they found themselves a quarterback in Phil Jurkovich, who to me, week in and week out, you watch him play, he's getting better by the week for Boston College. He's making plays down the field. The Boston College has shown the ability to have some skill position talent to make plays as well. There's a lot to like here with this quarterback for Boston College, who transferred here to Boston College from Notre Dame. So you talk about a guy that's going to be really fired up and chomping at the bit to play his former team, Notre Dame. It wouldn't surprise me to see him play very well and throw the football around and make some plays in the passing game. And the one issue for Notre Dame is last week against Clemson, 439 yards given up through the air last week to DJ Uiagalelei and the Clemson offense. That could be a little bit of trouble. The Boston, it's hard to run on Notre Dame's defense. Travis Etienne found that out last week, but their secondary can be thrown on a little bit. We've seen that this year. Boston College, the last few weeks, you've seen them be more of a pass team than a run team. They haven't had run the football with a whole lot of success. In fact, they're barely averaging a little over 100 yards per game on the ground this season. So just goes to show you they have struggled to run the football. I think it's not a bad matchup for Boston College. They have been outstanding in the underdog role. This year alone, they're 4-1 ATS as an underdog. Long term, they're 14-4-1. In the last 19 tries, they've been an underdog. And here they are in this role again. And Notre Dame under Brian Kelly, if you go back and you see them playing big games, whether they won that game or they lost that big game, obviously they won it last week against Clemson. You look and you see how they did the week after in the next game. They either lost or they won very ugly. They did just enough to get by and to win the next game. I think this is a very dangerous game and a very dangerous spot for Notre Dame. I don't want this double-digit favorite. The money's come in on Boston College, and I wholeheartedly agree we might have a live home underdog here with the Boston College Eagles. Pac-12 action, we've got Oregon taking on Washington State. We've got Oregon 10.5 point road favorites here in Pullman. The total 57.5, 58. Beware the weather. It's looking like it may not be the greatest. Rain in the forecast potentially for Pullman. Probably explains why the totals come down from 60.5 to 57.5. That being said, I like the look of the two offenses last week. Oregon, Tyler Shuff taken over at quarterback for Justin Herbert, who of course is on now in the NFL with the Chargers. Didn't know what to expect from him. Let's not forget Penny Sewell, one of their top tackles, the left tackle for Oregon, decided not to play this year. So how good was that offensive line going to be? The secondary had a couple opt-outs as well for the Ducks coming into this season. But you look at their opener last week against Stanford, both sides of the ball, I thought Oregon was extremely impressive. Tyler Shuff throwing it, Tyler Shuff running it. Kind of looked like Justin Herbert out there last week in the victory against Stanford. Quarterback capable of making plays running with the football and throwing it. And again, he's got a long way to go to be Justin Herbert and have the kind of career he had at Oregon. But positive signs for the young quarterback. The defense, we knew they were going to be pretty good coming into this season. They had a good defense last year. Oregon expected to be pretty good again on that side of the ball this year, and they really did bottle up Stanford's offense last week pretty well in that game, and Oregon took over, dominated the second half. A lot to like with Oregon. And I'll be the first to admit, Washington State, a team I got completely wrong last week. I took Oregon State against them because I thought Washington State was just in a world of hurt. New starting quarterback. You bring in Nick Rolovich, a new head coach, new systems, a completely revamped and rebuilt defense along the defensive line, especially. Completely new look for Washington State. It didn't matter. They went into Oregon State last week and beat the Beavers and really controlled that game for the most part. Impressive victory. And I'm kind of upset that I undersold the coaching ability of Nick Rolovich. This guy can coach. I mean, he really can. What he did at Hawaii before taking the job here at Washington State was a really awesome reclamation project is what he had there at Hawaii. He made them competitive. He got them to a Mountain West champ. Think about that. Hawaii got to the Mountain West championship game with this guy as the head coach. Hawaii did that, and Hawaii's been just a miserable program for the better part of the last 5-10 years. The last time Hawaii really had a outstanding, phenomenal season was, the Colt Brennan days under June Jones, which was like 2004, 2005, way back in the day, 15 years ago at least. Nick Rolovich got something out of Hawaii. He made them a program that can be respectable again, turn them into a winning program. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him do good things here at Washington State. Some guys, they just go everywhere they go. They make the program better. And Nick Rolovich, already, it's just one game. I get it. And it's Oregon State, and Oregon State's nothing to write home about. They've got issues as well. But you go on the road, first game with all the changes, with barely an off season that's anything close to normal because of COVID-19. You go in there and you play as well as you did with a freshman quarterback too, and Jaden DeLaura. I think you deserve a lot of credit. Now, the good news for Washington State offensively is DeLaura ran the run and shoot at the high school level. That's actually the system he ran there previously. Now at college, and that's obviously the same offense Nick Rolovich has. So it's a great fit. And I think Washington State can put up some points in this game, even against Oregon's defense. And as much as Washington State held Oregon State's offense in check for a half, third quarter, fourth quarter, they couldn't stop Oregon State. And that worries me here against Oregon because the Ducks offense last week, they had a lot of success running the ball, throwing the football, and now they're facing a defense that I've still got a lot of question marks about. So I give Washington State credit, but that defense kind of, for the win last week, but that defense kind of crumbled in the second half, and they're lucky they just hung on at the end to stave off Oregon State for the win. That defense is going to get challenged here, in my opinion, by an Oregon team with a quarterback that looks like he's got some promise, a lot of team speed again at this team with receivers and running backs, including, of course, C.J. Verdell, the great running back, returning again this year. They're going to be in tough, I think, stopping Oregon. But I do think Washington State will put some points up on the board. Washington State's dominated Oregon head-to-head in this series from an ATS perspective. I mean, there is a staggering stat about Washington State when they face Oregon head-to-head. Now, these are all Mike Leach stats for the most part, and he's no longer there. But Washington State 10-0 ATS run against Oregon, and they've covered by an average of nearly 16 points per game, and here they are, a 10.5-point home underdog against Oregon. When a head-to-head series trend is that strong, I can't go against it. So for me, even though I think Oregon has matchup edges here, I would still lean only to Washington State now that it's at 10.5 in this game. The play I like the most, though, is the over. Even with some rain in the forecast, I don't think the wind is going to be much of a factor. I think the offenses can both contribute here and get you to a 30-28, 31-28 score, 35-24. That gets you over the total as well. I think we can get over 57.5 with the Ducks and the Cougars. And in the Big Ten, final college football game that we'll preview here on the six-pack, Wisconsin and Michigan. Wisconsin 4.5 to 5-point road favorites, 52.5 the total. This will be the first game in over 3 weeks for Wisconsin. So, beware if you're going to lay the points with them. Obviously, a lot of people are. Michigan's off 2 really bad performances in a row, losses to Michigan State and Indiana in consecutive games. Jim Harbaugh defense that I was concerned about coming into this season with so many new faces. They've looked like a rebuilding defense the last couple weeks. Couldn't stop Michael Penix in Indiana last week. Had trouble the week before that against Rocky Lombardi and a kind of an unassuming Michigan State offense, able to move the ball against Michigan. That's trouble now against Wisconsin because Graham Mertz, assuming he's going to play, and it sure looks like he's going to be good to go for the Wisconsin Badgers in this game. He's questionable, but the early reports are, with the money going in like it's been, they are expecting him to play. He hasn't tested positive this week and all the tests he's got to pass through. So I would assume Graham Mertz is going to be back. He was amazing in the one and only game that Wisconsin has played this year. Now, granted, it was a bad Illinois team, but he was looking like a quarterback that Wisconsin can get pretty excited about. And if he starts here, Michigan's defense could have their hands full. Joe Milton, he's a work in progress. He's definitely a project quarterback for Michigan. He's not a finished product just yet. He's still trying to get better as he gets more starts under his belt. But there are things to like for Michigan. They did move the ball in every game they've played this season at some point. And now they're facing a Wisconsin defense that played really well against Illinois. And Wisconsin's defense, again, they could be very good. They've got a decent amount of returnees on that side of the football at all 3 levels. But again, when your only test is Illinois, how good is your Wisconsin defense? We don't know that yet. This should be a bit greater test here. It's another game where I'm kind of interested in the over here at 52.5, a reasonable number. Look, I know Wisconsin is usually thought of as this plodding, rely on running the football, rely on the defense type of football team and an under team as a result. But I was impressed with Wisconsin taking big, deep shots down the field with Mertz. I think they like Mertz's arm. He is not Jack Cohen. He's not, Alex Hornibrook or a bunch of all these other middling quarterbacks that Wisconsin has had in recent years. This is a guy with an arm that can throw the football, and it looks like Paul Chryst the head coach is willing to let him throw the ball vertically down the field, something that may not be accounted for with Wisconsin totals right now. So I think there's a tinge of value over this 52.5 here when it comes to Badgers Wolverines here on Saturday night. All right, let's go to the NFL. 3 games in the NFL. We'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Carolina Panthers. Tampa Bay 5.5, 6-point road favorites, 50.5, 51 the total in this game. Tampa Bay's taking money this week. They opened 4.5. They're up to 6 now. People looking at the bounce back spot here for the Bucs. And you can understand the reason. It's a Bucs, trying to bounce back after the humiliation of losing 38-3. I was just absolutely stunned by the fact that not that they lost to New Orleans, because New Orleans is a good team, but they got completely dominated on both sides of the football by the Saints last week on Sunday Night Football. And at Tampa Bay now, they're going to be a little bit angry and maybe take out their frustrations on Carolina. I do think the matchup's good for Tampa here. Carolina hasn't gotten a pass rush consistently on opposing quarterbacks in weeks. It's been one of the biggest problems that Matt Rule's team has had. They have not gotten pressure from their pass rush. And if you give Tom Brady time, and chances are he's going to have time that he didn't have against that Saints pass rush last week, if he gets that time here, he's going to make plays because, finally you get a full week of practice for Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They can get a little bit healthier now. Antonio Brown can have a full week of practice to develop more chemistry and cohesion with Brady. And now that offense that look, I think with Brown coming into the team, it just threw everything off. Everything was just a little bit out of sync. Too many mouths to feed, too many cooks in the kitchen syndrome last week for Tampa Bay. Now you get another week of practice to really iron out the kinks, figure out where you want to give the ball and when you want to get each guy the ball. There's a lot of players to go around for Brady here to try to get the ball to. Brown and Godwin and Evans and Gronkowski. It goes on and on and on. So it's difficult. And they needed, I think, another week of practice. So I expect that offense to be better. You're also taking a step down in class going to the Carolina defense here, which got absolutely carved up last week by Kansas City. But their offense was good, and it's why they covered wire to wire against the Chiefs last week. And the one caveat here with, 5.5, 6 now, laying these points with Tampa Bay here on the road is all Teddy Bridgewater does is cover as an underdog. His underdog ATS record is staggering. It's amazing how good it is. Something like 21-5, as an underdog in his career. He's just a point spread machine catching points, and he's catching a lot of points here. But, I got issues here with Carolina a little bit, not only the defensive side, but their offensive line against one of the better defensive fronts. They played a defensive front that wasn't happy with the lack of pressure they got last week against the Saints. That worries me. Christian McCaffrey not being in the game worries me. He's out again due to injury, and I get it. They've gotten some decent play in a fill-in role from a backup running back spot from Mike Davis. But again, against better defenses, I don't know if he's going to be able to make that same impact here. Brady off a loss is obviously something that the betting markets are paying attention to because they are betting it here. He's 44-21 ATS off a loss in his career, which is absolutely outstanding. And the numbers actually get better. It actually gets better, that ATS number, because if you take when he's laying less than a touchdown off a loss and laying less than 7 points in a game, Brady is 36-10 against the spread off a loss. So it gets even better for Brady in that regard. I understand why Tampa's getting them. And nobody's backed Carolina many more times lately than I have. I've taken Carolina a bunch. I've lost some and I've won some. Win some, lose some with Carolina. I was on Carolina against New Orleans. They covered. I was on Carolina against Atlanta on the Thursday night game. They lost. I was on Carolina last week against Kansas City. They covered wire to wire. I will not be on them here. I agree with the money here. I think Tampa Bay gets the job done here, laying the points. Next up, we've got Buffalo, Arizona. Good matchup. Two good quarterbacks as well. Kyler Murray, Josh Allen. Arizona 2.5-point home favorites, 56 the total. This total has been just steamed up. It opened as low as 49 in some spots, and then it was 51, 52 by Monday morning. And since then, it's been bet all the way up to 56. I fully agree. I think this is a shootout. You've got defensive injuries on both teams going into this game. That's a big concern. Arizona was shorthanded significantly last week against the Miami Dolphins in their secondary, and it showed. Tua Tagovailoa picked them apart. That's a concern for me going into this game. Their secondary still coming into this game may not get any of those key players back in that Arizona secondary, and it's a plethora of players for the Arizona Cardinals in that secondary that are questionable and or doubtful to play here on Sunday. It's a cluster injury situation here with the Arizona pass defense at this point in time. And that's definitely something you've got to worry about when you're facing Josh Allen, you're facing Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley, and a Buffalo passing attack that you saw what they did to a weakened or injury-riddled secondary. Now, they weren't injury-riddled last week, Seattle. They were just not good. But you see what they can do to a secondary that's vulnerable, the Bills, when they're on their game. They can absolutely pick it apart. Josh Allen can absolutely decimate a secondary that isn't playing well. And you look at the situation here, Robert Alford, Dre Kirkpatrick, Kevin Peterson. It is a very troubling situation here with these cluster injuries in the secondary. And now to make matters worse, Budda Baker, one of the best safeties in the NFL for this Arizona team, groin injury and now downgraded from probable to questionable. And even his status now in some doubt for Sunday. And if they don't have him, geez, that is a thin patchwork secondary to say the least. And they weren't good last week against Miami. Bills should score theirs, but Arizona's going to get theirs too. I mean, I loved what I saw from Murray and the offense of the Cardinals last week against Miami. Even though they lost the game, they were probably going to win that game, find a way to come back and win it if Cliff Kingsbury doesn't settle for a field goal, which obviously wasn't good, and ended up losing the game for Arizona against Miami last week. If he goes for it on that fourth down play late, they probably score a touchdown because I don't think Miami was stopping them. They weren't stopping the Arizona offense throughout the entire game. I was absolutely shocked that that Arizona didn't go for it on that fourth down play with all the success they had. And Arizona paid the price for it. But Kyler Murray was great, running the football, throwing the football. And there's just a lot of weapons here for even the Bills defense, which, again, hasn't been as good this year to deal with. And I like Tre'Davious White. He's a great cornerback. But guess what? He's the number one cornerback. He's the shutdown corner. You know he's going to be matched up with DeAndre Hopkins here in this game. And he's giving a significant height advantage and size advantage up to DeAndre Hopkins in this game. He's a good cornerback. He battles. He's usually in good position. But sometimes you can't defy gravity or genetics. And you are up against it from a height and size perspective here against DeAndre Hopkins. That's a tough matchup for him. I think he's going to struggle with it. Hopkins should have a big day. Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella, Larry Fitz, the old man, Larry Fitzgerald can still get it done. Too many receivers for this Bills secondary to stop, especially if Hyde in the secondary is out for the Bills, and he's the one guy that's questionable. Matt Milano is expected to play, and that's big for the Bills, getting him back at linebacker, but he's been ailing for weeks. He hasn't looked 100% even when he has played, and he might get injured again because that's been his pattern this year. He comes back for a game or two and gets hurt again. So that's issues for the Buffalo defense here going into this game as well. I understand why the total's gone up. It should be an absolute shootout here in the desert. 31-28 gets you over the total. I think that's very plausible between these two teams. As far as the side goes, I lean Arizona here. I think it's a difficult situation for Buffalo. You're going on the road, 2 big home wins against New England and Seattle, back-to-back weeks, 2 games you were fired up for. Obviously, the Patriots finally slayed the Dragons, slay the Beast, the Demons, finally beat New England, and then you beat one of the best teams in the NFL, Seattle, last week. Now you go on the road. I worry a little bit about the spot here for the Bills, and Arizona off the tough loss. They don't want to drop 2 home games in a row. I can understand why Arizona, some people like them this week. I like the total more, but if I were to bet this game from a side perspective, it's the home favorite for me, Arizona, or pass. Seattle, LA Rams, final game of the Friday Football 6-pack. Rams 2-point home favorites in that beautiful new stadium there in LA, 54.5 the total. And it's a Rams spot. It's not necessarily a Seattle spot. Let's put it that way. Rams off a bye, and prior to the bye, the Rams got their teeth kicked in by Miami on the scoreboard. Although on the stat sheet and in the box score, they actually heavily outgained the Dolphins in the loss to Miami a couple weeks ago before their bye week. But Jared Goff turned into bad Jared Goff on the road, which sometimes happens with him. Turnovers, mistakes, failing to finish drives, and the defense struggled at times, and just bad in the special teams game, and bad with turnovers. Scoop and score touchdown, defensive touchdown for Miami, special teams touchdown for Miami. Remember, that was Tua Tagovailoa's first start against when the Rams played the Dolphins. And again, the Rams just really shot themselves in the foot in that game. So that's the one concern here about maybe backing Seattle is Rams are going to be in a bad mood. Rams off the bye, extra time to prepare, chance to get healthy. That could be trouble for Seattle. That being said, how truly good are the LA Rams? That's going to be my fundamental case here in this game for the Seattle side. How good are the Rams? Seriously, look at the victories. What quality win do they have? Chicago at home. And even that's a decent win. I wouldn't call that a great win because that team's had a pathetic offense all year. They beat Chicago at home. The other wins, the four NFC East, the NFC least teams, Philadelphia, Washington football team, New York Giants, and Dallas. So those four stink bomb teams from the NFC East and Chicago are the wins this year for LA. Against the teams that were a little bit tougher, a little bit better, San Francisco loss, Buffalo loss, Miami loss. So you could argue they haven't really beaten a really, really good team. They've beaten an okay team, a decent team, borderline good team, but a great team? Not yet. Is Seattle a great team? Great offense. And more than anything, Russell Wilson off that kind of performance. Like the defense was terrible last week, especially in the secondary for the Seahawks against Buffalo. But for Russell Wilson, you don't see him have a game like that very often. He was off his game. 4 turnovers for the Seattle offense, multiple interceptions for Russell Wilson. I like backing Russell Wilson off a game like that because he doesn't have 2 bad ones in a row very often. I think he's pissed. I think he's fired up. He's back to a divisional game now for Seattle. Keep in mind how bad the spot was, too, for Seattle last week. They went cross-country to play Buffalo, the only non-division game for the Seahawks in a 5-game swatch. You know, they played San Fran, they played Arizona, then they went on the road to play Buffalo outside the conference. Now you play 2 more division games, Rams this week and a rematch with Arizona next week. Seattle's going to bring the focus here. And you look at long-term stats off a loss, which is always what I like, quality teams off a loss. How do they do? Well, if you're Seattle off a loss since 2010, 30-14 against the spread off a loss. And usually when you're talking about a team ATS off a loss sample size, what their ATS record off a loss, and you're talking 10 years, usually I'll say, what are you giving me this for? 10 years? I don't care about the last 10 years. Different coaches, different players. Well, guess what? The last 10 years of Seattle Seahawks football have been Pete Carroll years. And almost all of them have been Russell Wilson years for this Seattle Seahawks team. In fact, I'm pretty sure maybe the first year Carroll was there, Russell Wilson wasn't. But that 30-14 ATS mark for Seattle off a loss since 2010, they're all Pete Carroll numbers. Oh, yeah, he's still the head coach. So this is a trend that applies to the same head coach over that time. That's why, to me, this ATS record is more significant than it would be for other teams off in the last 10 years. Like if you tell me the Cleveland Browns are that ATS record off a loss the last 10 years, I'm like, who cares? They've had 10 coaches essentially during that last 10-year span. But this is all Pete Carroll, and this is just about all Russell Wilson as well. Those ATS numbers, you get a good performance usually from this coach and this quarterback off a loss. I think you get another one on Sunday. If I'm betting that game, it's Seattle. I'm not quite ready to buy what the LA Rams and Sean McVay are selling. I like McVay a lot. It actually bothers me when I go against him because I respect what he does as a coach, and the extra time to prepare with him should help. But I still think Seattle off the loss is the way to go. The Rams are going to have to prove to me they can step up, beat one of the best teams they've played so far. And the Seattle defense was terrible last week. I get it, but now it's the second week for Jamal Adams. You're still getting a little bit healthier. You did stop the run last week against the Bills. That's the good thing. Bills didn't run at all on Seattle, and they couldn't run the football. They stopped the run. Unfortunately, their pass defense got shredded. But if you commit to stopping the run, and if they can stop the run against the Rams here, Jared Goff beating you through the air exclusively in the passing game doesn't scare me as much as Josh Allen beating me through the air last week in the passing game. I like Seattle here to get the win in this NFC West rivalry matchup. All right, that is it. That's your Friday Football Six-Pack, and that's the end of the week for the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report. Reminder, busy Saturday, busy weekend. I'm on the air tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific, with the college football closing time betting show. Connor Mack and I breaking down the college football games leading up to kickoff. And I'm here again Sunday afternoon, I should say, early afternoon, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with the NFL Closing Time Betting Show. Me, Connor Mack, and Ski Profit will break down the NFL Week 10 games leading up to kickoff right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Thank you for tuning in and supporting the channel and this show. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the NFL and college football action. Enjoy the games and good luck. I'll be back again with you on Monday for a new week and another edition of the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report.